Good morning and welcome to another week with Grace Church. We're so glad you joined us online today. Please note that if you would like to give online, you can do so at www.gchurch.us/giving. You also have the availability to give through text by texting 84321 or by mailing a check to 1515 17th Street in North Bend, Oregon. As always, you can stay up to date with what's going on at the church through our website, www.gchurch.us.
It's called Java with Jason, and I drink a cup of coffee while I'm talking to the camera. But it's just been kind of a nice outlet to very informally be able to just kind of talk about some things that are on my mind. Because what happens is Carrie gets tired of listening to it all the time, so it's just it's an opportunity for me to be able to kind of just get some things out. I'm pretty audio, and so I have to kind of hear it said a couple times before it kind of clicks in my head. And so sometimes I tend to get a little neurotic as well because I've got so many thoughts and things happening in my head, and sometimes I will just blurt out a thought mid like a sentence mid-thought. And I think it's better if it's purple and nobody knows what I'm talking about because it's just been kind of mulling around in there. But anyway, so I got this YouTube channel, and Java with Jason, you can search it. How many have a YouTube account? Raise your hand. All right, maybe this isn't my demographic, but if you do, make sure you subscribe and check that out. And if you don't, ask your grandkid, so they'll get you on there. But one of the things that I really I've been talking to a few different people about this last couple of weeks, and just about the loneliness epidemic that's happening right now, and especially with us kind of coming off of we're starting to kind of get back into normal routines again, and people are having a hard time with it. People are having a hard time getting back in the groove, and there's just a lot of loneliness around. And I've even heard from people, that they're like, I'm not afraid to be around people. I just don't know how to be around people anymore. And I've even talked to a few people that says I don't really see the need for it anymore. I mean, I lived for 2 years without people around, and I'm okay. And they're not. They're a little crazy, but they think that they are. So in Genesis 2:18, the first slide here, it says, then the Lord God said, "It is not good for man to be alone." Now, this is just 2 chapters into the Bible. This is the very first thing that God said was bad. So if you ever pay attention to first things, especially as we're in the new year, we always kind of, what's the first thing? What's the first thing Jesus said? What's the first thing Jesus did? First thing that God said was bad was for man to be alone. And so that's an important statement right there, is he created man, and then he immediately decided it's not good that you're just by yourself. And so a lot of people use this verse, for weddings and things like that, but it's more than just that. It's more than just the marriage, a relationship. We were never meant to be alone. So a lot of people say this. Next slide. All I need is God, and that is a religious cop-out. And a lot of people say that if that were true, then you would, here's the caveat really, is if all you need is God and you know God's heart, then you know that that's not all you need. If you know how God created you, he actually created you to be in connection, you would know that that's not all you need. So for people to really piously say, oh, all I need is God in my life, well, then you don't know God. So if all you need is him, get to know him and realize that that's not all that you need. Because he says it pretty plainly. If we truly know him, if we truly trust him, if we truly believe God, we understand that he created us for much more, and he did not create us to be alone. There was a Forbes article put out, this is back in 2019, so this is before any lockdowns or any isolation was happening. But the article is called Millennials and the Loneliness Epidemic. And it says, according to a 2018 survey from The Economist and the Kaiser Family Foundation, more than 2 in 10 adults in the United States, that's 22%, and the United Kingdom say they always or often feel lonely, lack of companionship, or feel left out or isolated. This was before even any of the pandemic stuff was happening. It found that lonely individuals had a 26% higher risk of dying early. It went on to say, because I was reading through this, and we attribute this a lot to social media and some of the isolation that's created. I agree that social media can create a lot of isolation. However, I have also seen it create a great amount of connection, where we have the availability. Like, I have friends all across the world right now that before I would not be able to be in contact with, that I can now be in contact with. So it can create an artificial connection with others, but we have the opportunity to be in so much more connection with people that we never would have been able to. But it says, if we add the generational effects, the GI generation, with the GI generation's rising living standards and high savings rates after World War II, so the GI generation is before the boomers, combined with their success at expanding social insurance for seniors, made possible an increasing solo lifestyle as they grew older. This happened first in the birth of the suburban nuclear family in the 1950s and 60s. People started moving out of cities where there were highly populated areas, and they started kind of moving out into less populated areas. And then the spread of independence spread into senior living in the 1970s and 80s. The silent generation began retiring at age 65 in the 90s at the peak of the senior solo living rates. Since then, they have pulled the rate down a bit due to more seniors living in their grown children and rising male longevity. So it's been a problem that's been rising for a while. The retirement of the GI generation coincided with boomers coming of age. It was the peak of the generation gap, and the boomers were as eager to leave their parents as their parents were for their kids to leave. The 1970s saw the sharpest decline in any decade in the 20th century in the average number of persons per household. As they've aged, boomers have continued to drive up rates of solo living in each age bracket they've occupied. Generation X has taken these trends in the opposite direction, while Xers haven't really campaigned for togetherness on a social level or a societal level. They have sought it in their own lives and families. Millennials are prioritizing groups both on a personal and societal level. Already, they've largely stabilized the solo living rates in their age bracket. Despite their rising average marriage rate, they're getting married a lot later, and declining fertility. They're not having as many children. Millennials are congregating in makeshift communities, living with each other in traditional families, flocking to co-working spaces, crowding into dense urban locales, and using technology to stay in close communication. And of course, they are much more likely to live with their parents. Loneliness is still something that greatly troubles millennials. According to the 2016 Iceland UK census, loneliness is the number one fear of young people today, ranking ahead of losing a home or a job. Fully 42% of millennial women are more afraid of loneliness than a cancer diagnosis, by far the highest share of any generation. This fear has been ingrained in the very lexicon of millennials, immortalizing the acronyms like FOMO. Does anyone know what FOMO means? Fear of missing out, and its many companion terms. So, and this is before we were in lockdown. This is before any of those things were happening. Loneliness was already at the forefront of our minds. And I just read that. I found it interesting. I think generational things are really interesting. I really like to kind of hear that. And I know, and again, I've said this before, millennials get just a really bad rap a lot of times. But millennials are the product of generations that have come. And so we need to look at, where did this sense of loneliness come from? And if we want to really kind of look back, it came from when we started moving away from cities. We started looking at, all of a sudden we didn't have multi-generational homes anymore. All of a sudden our parents went to senior living facilities, and we didn't have that togetherness anymore. We're starting to get back there. There's hope. Is that one of the things we've seen? One of the things I've noticed too is where the boomer generation was very driven and work oriented, which is those are good things. We don't want lazy people. We don't want freeloading people. We want people with good work ethic. But they had work ethic at the expense of their families. And so now what we're seeing is a generation who saw that, who was missing out on their families, who missed out on having parents that were around, and they are now looking at at their families. They're actually negotiating, excuse me, hang on, this isn't for effect. The biggest negotiation right now in jobs is not salary, but it's your time off. How much time off, how much flexibility you have with your job so that you're able to spend more time with your families. That was one of the biggest things when I made my job move from the theater to the school district. Was I have a super flexible schedule right now, and I just made sure that carried through as well, which for the most part it has. So we were created for connection, but we have a tendency towards isolation. In Ephesians 2:19 through 22, says the NASB version. So then you are no longer strangers and foreigners, but you are fellow citizens with the saints, and are of God's household, having been built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, Christ Jesus himself being the cornerstone, in whom the whole building, being lifted together, is growing into a holy temple in the Lord, in whom you also are being built together into a dwelling of God in the Spirit. So if you look at the Message translation, which is the next slide, it said, that's plain enough, isn't it? You're no longer wandering exiles. The kingdom of faith is now your home country. You're no longer strangers or outsiders. You belong here, with as much right to the name Christian as anyone. God is building a home. He's using us all, irrespective of how we got here, in what he is building. He used the apostles and prophets for the foundation. Now he's using you, fitting you brick by brick, stone by stone, with Christ Jesus as the cornerstone that holds all the parts together. We see it taking shape day after day, a holy temple built by God, all of us built into it, a temple in which God is quite at home. Isn't that, I love that translation. Because again, we're building a home, we're building a family. You're part of a family. Just by coming here, you're part of a family. However, even though we can be in a room full of people and still be very lonely. And that is the problem in our society, is it's not so much, we just think, man, if we can just get everybody in a room again, we'll be fine. No, that's not the answer. If we can get everybody to be real with themselves and real with God again, that's the answer. If we can allow other people to know who we are, to be known, and to get to know others, that's the answer to defeat loneliness. It's not just your mere proximity. Your dreams and purposes are too big for you to accomplish alone. And if they aren't, then they're not big enough. I mean, honestly, hardcore. Once you know that you need help, you know that you need God and you need other people around you. But you have to recognize that first. You have to recognize that you cannot accomplish what you have been called to accomplish on your own. You need people and you need God around. You need God in you, and you need people around you. So let's talk a little bit about loneliness versus solitude, because I know all you introverts are getting a little bit nervous when I'm talking about loneliness, because you like your loneliness and you want to hold on to it as tightly as you can. But there's a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is a separation, anxiety brought on by the feeling of being disconnected, out of touch. It's the loss of intimacy or feeling of belonging. That's loneliness. We've all been there at some point. We've all been there. We've all had that separation feeling. We all feel like, just like nobody understands me. Nobody knows what I'm going through. We've all felt that loneliness before. However, solitude is the time that we pull away from everything to be alone, talk to the Father, listen to God, and be rejuvenated in our mind and our heart. So we still need to, even us extroverts that like to be around people all the time, sometimes we do need to pull away and we need to get alone with God every once in a while. It doesn't have to be very long, doesn't have to be all day. It's different times for different people, what you need to be rejuvenated, but we all need that time. However, we need that time for a purpose. It's not just to kind of get in our caves and get blessed. It's so that we can then go back out and serve out of the fulfillment that we have from solitude, not isolating, solitude. Jesus did this a lot, and I've heard a lot of people use it as an excuse to not like to be around people. Jesus liked to go and go away and pray, or go away from the crowds and be in solitude. But he did that for a purpose. He did that so that he could get out of the noise for just a moment and hear his Father. And we need to do that. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise in community. Community is messy. Being around people and how people interact with each other is messy, and it's gritty. It can be hard a lot of times. And so if we know how to balance that and how to just kind of step away every once in a while and get in a place of solitude, then we can then go back, and out of our abundance, we can be a part of other people's lives as well. Matthew 6:6, this isn't on the slide, but it says, "As for you, when you pray, go into your inner room, close your door, and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you." Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." And this is something I will tell you, it's hard to find solitude in a house of 6 people. But there's ways to do it. I will tell you my favorite place to go, and sometimes I'll do this during lunch. Actually, yesterday I did it after the big party, and there was just a lot of, I was around a lot of people. I just go to the boardwalk, the North Bend Boardwalk. That's my favorite place to go. Me and a lot of dog walkers and a lot of people that feed birds, but I just love to go there because that's where I can kind of just get quiet and kind of get my solitude and get my head back on before I walk back into the house that I love. By the way, my house is loud. There's always something going on. There is always, right now my kids are learning how to cook for themselves, and so there is sauce and stuff flying all over the place. And it's crazy. And I think some people walk into our home and my dad, and they get a little anxious because it's just a lot happening. And I will tell you too, you'll know this if you get on my channel, but I've been turned on a little bit to minimalism. And there's something about the aesthetic of it, and I think kind of helps my artistic brain, but there's just something about it that's calming if I'm not looking at a lot of clutter. Well, if you have 4 children, that's an impossible lifestyle. So what I've done is I basically have set myself up to fail. That's what I've done, because every day I come home, is this not right? Every day I come home, and I just start picking, basically I have to swim through the backpacks and the shoes first, and then I get into the rest of the house. But anyway, all that to say, I love my home. I love that. I love the hustle and bustle of it. And my daughter is turning 16, and I'm already, in my head seeing her off to college and thinking like, oh, it's gonna be so quiet around here because she's as loud as I am. And just all of those things. They were talking yesterday about how they were moving rooms when she moved out, and I'm not ready for that yet. And even thinking about that, and Allie's right behind her, and then they're both gonna leave, and we're just gonna have the boys. And I don't know what's going to happen there. Anyway, where was I? The pain of standing alone is real. And if we are honest with ourselves and honest with God, we understand that pain. It's not fun. I know we can all paint the smile on our face and say everything's fine, everything's great. It's me and God. We're just moving forward. But that pain is real if you're not walking with someone, and we do have to be honest. There's something about honesty that is not it's not pleasant to look at sometimes. But if we're really just honest with ourselves and say, this is this is hard. I'm going through a hard time. I need some help. I think so many times in the church world especially, we are afraid to ask for help because then, well, maybe our faith is wavering, or maybe we don't have enough faith to go through what we're going through with just us and God. And I think I think that, yes, that's true. I think that in order to hold on to your faith, you need people around you to remind you what the Word of God says. I think you need people around you to pray for you when you can't pray for yourself. I think you need people around you to keep that faith, to keep the faith. And so don't ever be afraid to say, you know what, I'm having a hard time, because it's not an anti-faith statement. Do you have the right people in your life? You can have the wrong people around you. You can be in connection to the wrong people. And you need to make sure that they're the right people. Proverbs 14:7, it's not on the slide there, but it says, leave the presence of a fool, or you will not discern the words of knowledge. Make sure you're getting good counsel in your life. Like I said, relationships are messy. How human beings interact with each other is gritty and hard and dirty work, and I'm intrigued by social norms and how people interact, and sometimes I think in another time I could be a counselor. Although when I took counseling in Bible college, the biggest critique I always got is, Jason, you got to watch your face, because we would do role plays with our teacher, and so the teacher would be the person there coming for counseling, and so we would take turns asking questions, and there were some real life. She had some real life situations that she'd be in, and so I remember one in particular. It was a particularly, this woman reminded me of my grandmother. Like, she was my grandma. She looked like my grandma. She talked like my grandma. She's my grandmother. And there was one class where she basically exposed this just horrifically graphic problem that she had. And she had to stop and say, Jason, you have to relax your face and close your mouth. Because I was just, ha, ha, ha. And so at that point, one time she just said, she goes, maybe counseling is not your thing. But I'm always intrigued by human relationships and how that works. So, if you look at how me and Kara work, we react to situations very differently, and that is a good thing. Because I often thought, I'm like, man, it'd be so much easier if she would just act more like me. Have you ever thought that? The world would just be a better place if people would just act more like us, right? And then Chloe came along, and she acts just like me, and I can't stand her sometimes. So I realized that it's really okay that Kara acts a little differently. So like I said, relationships are messy. And so a lot of times I've heard a lot of sermons where it's like, this is how you get friends. You need to be, we can all agree, we need to be around people or relationships that will elevate us. We don't need to be around relationships that bring us down. And so I've heard a lot of sermons about, this is how you get friends that will elevate you. And let me just tell you, that's the most self-serving, selfish, self-absorbed way to approach a relationship, is to come and say, let me see what you can do for me. And if you can't bring me up to the level that I want to be brought up to, we can't be friends. Yet that is how the church has operated for so long. I can tell you right now, growing up as a pastor's kid, most people wanted to be my friend to see what they could get from me. All growing up. And, they wanted a position in the church, and so let's be friends with the pastor's kid, or they just wanted something. They wanted something. And so I grew up all realizing, if I want friends, I better figure out what I have to give. Now, I did that more out of survival mode than out of like a giving mode. But I think we need to really kind of turn that whole paradigm and not worry about, am I surrounding myself with people that are going to elevate me, but how can I elevate all the people that are around me? How can I be that person that really that elevates? Relationships are supposed to be about others. The very definition of relationship is our relationship with other people. And so it should be about what we can give in their lives and not preoccupied with how what they're going to give us. Which, by the way, most people found out very quickly that by being friends with me did not give them any kind of position in the church or any kind of clout or anything, and so I quickly got dropped by many of my friendships. And also, too, if their parents ever got mad at my parents or didn't like something that the church was doing, I immediately lost friendships. Immediately. And so that's really kind of how I shaped my whole life on relationships is, well, as long as I can keep them happy, then they will be my friend. And that is a horrible, horrible way to live. So we're gonna park in this scripture for a little bit, but Ecclesiastes 4:9 through 12, and we hear this a lot for weddings. This is not just a wedding verse. When this was written, they did not have a wedding program in mind. This is a really good connection and relationship verse. It says, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. For if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. Furthermore, if 2 lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overpower him who is alone, 2 could resist him. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. Now, how many have heard that at a wedding? I mean, we've all heard that at weddings before. But again, it's not just for marriage. This is about our connection with other people, and it's about the safety and the strength in being connected. So the first verse there, it says, 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. We are more effective together. You know, the big word used to be synergy. But we are more effective when we're working together than when we're trying to do something on our own. I know this just in our family. If me and Kara do this where you can imagine there's always a lot of like cleaning, and there's always a lot of like, there's always something to cook or something to clean or something to pick up or some kid to take away. And so me and Kara get burned out at different times, which is a good thing that we don't get burned out at both at the same time. But we'll get burned out, and the other one will kind of have to pick up the load, but that doesn't mean that person that maybe has to pick up that load, me, sometimes, doesn't get like really, well, no, I mean, Kara does. See, Kara picks up the load too, but she's fine with it. When I have to pick up a little bit extra load and she's passed out because she's just had a long day of teaching with masks and kids and protocols and everything, I get so resentful because I'm like, you lazy, and I think all of those things, but so we burn out at different times. However, every once in a while, we hit this sweet spot where we're both on at the same time. And let me tell you, we get so much done around the house, and we're clicking, and kids are being picked up there, and I'm dropping them off there, and she's picking them up after, and we are like this well-oiled machine, and it's amazing. And I'm like, we have got this. We need to write a book about how to run a household, and maybe we need more children because maybe this isn't enough, and like we've got this, we've got this down, and this is good, but then like the next day, I'm done. So, but it's that we all know this. We're more effective when we work together. We get more done. There's that whole. It's easier. It's better. It's easier to stay motivated when you've got someone next to you doing it. You don't feel like you're just all alone in the pits. We tend to choose people who reflect the worst part of ourselves because it makes us feel justified in our shortcomings. That's what we tend to do. We tend to find people who aren't quite as good as we are. We tend to find people that aren't as attractive as we are. We tend to find people who maybe aren't as outgoing as we are. In sports, I find you try to be friends with people that just aren't as good. I laugh because both of my daughters, we call them their arch nemesises, but both of my daughters have other friends who are just at the same level with them on everything, academics, sports, theater. And, it's just that little kind of irritation, like, oh, I'm up against them again, and so that's why it's always good to just find people that are just not as good as you, and it's not hard to find. So No, but we tend to do that. We tend to, if we have weakness, some people say, oh, have you ever heard somebody say like, my gosh, everyone around, all of my friends are so like unmotivated and not driven. Well, you probably aren't very motivated yourself, but you're probably just a little bit more motivated than they are. So we tend to find like people who are just not, just a little bit less, and it makes us feel better about ourselves, So like if you're kind of, let me think of, maybe you're a little judgmental, and so you're going to find people who are really judgmental, and then you're going to be like, well, I'm not as bad as that guy. That's just our tendency. And what that does is instead of us working together, it's still that kind of like that little hierarchy of, well, who doesn't want to be the main character? Do you ever think about that? Like, you ever think if your life was a sitcom, would you be the main character? Would you be the funny neighbor? You haven't thought about that? Okay. Because sometimes I wonder, like, would I be Seinfeld or would I be Kramer next door? Like, which character would I play in this scenario? So, you should think about it. Surround yourself with people who have the same intentions. You don't have to find people who have it all together. You don't have to find perfect people because, oh, that's really depressing. But no, you just have to find people who are have the same intentions, working to the same goal as you are. You guys are all working the same rate. I think that's why you find such good friends in college, because you guys, it's just you guys are all, we're all just trying to like figure out how not to live at home anymore, and there's classes and curfew, and all those things that we're all moving the same way. She's ready for me to move on. All right, 4. I'm just playing dummy. It's good. Drive me, please. All right, for either of, next verse says, for if either of them falls, the one will lift up his companion. But woe to the one who falls when there is not another to lift him up. We need to stand in each other's weaknesses. Now, this is countercultural right now because we are in a culture that loves to expose people's weaknesses. We love to catch people in their weaknesses. You see that all over in the whole cancel culture thing. We love to we love to find 10-year-old videos of someone saying something, and we want to expose that, and we want to bring them down. We are in a culture where we want to bring each other down. And it's really, it's very countercultural for us to just stand with other people in their weaknesses, to be able to lift them up where they are and just stand with them. We tend to celebrate failure. We tend to celebrate it. We love it. It makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves, I think. But we need to begin to stand when someone falls. We need to just stand there with them. We need to be the strength, be someone they can lean on during that time, and get them out of that hole. Not point at them and say, "Look here, look what they did. I can't believe that." And secretly love it. Next slide. Furthermore, if two lie down together, they keep warm. But how can one be warm alone? And if one can overcome him who is alone, two can resist him. Now, you're looking at this and you're like, well, this definitely is about marriage, right? And it's not. I'm just going to tell you right now, this is about survival. And so we're not thinking about right now, we're not thinking about a marriage bed where two lie down. We're talking about, let's think about when people lived out in the open or were in sheep fields, where if you are lying down by yourself, you are vulnerable to animals, to weather, to all kinds of things where you need someone there. You need someone there. And, I thought about that. I tend to know, we're going to kind of go into pop culture just for a little bit, but when I watch movies, I can't separate myself from them. So there's that one movie, and I've never seen it, and I never can, but it's where they, I don't remember what it's called, but it's where they have to stay silent, and if they make a noise, then the monsters will hear, like the monsters are blind, but they have really good hearing. And so, what is it? Silent Place, that's it. They made 2 of them. I don't know how they can make a sequel of that. But anyway, so like, the monsters are blind, but they can hear really, really well. So if you make any sounds, they come at you. So I never watched it, but I saw the preview, and that was plenty for me. I got my money's worth right there. And so I watched the preview, and it's in the theater, and they have no background music during the whole preview. It's just these people trying to like get around and not make any noise. And of course, like a floorboard will creak or something will happen. And I can't breathe during that whole 3 minute. Like I can't even breathe. I'm so tense. And I was telling this for a reason. Survival. Oh yes, that's. Yeah, it's just a movie. I don't remember where I was going with that, so we're gonna move on. But this is about trust. This is about having someone. Oh, I know what I was gonna say. I can't handle movies like that because there is no time. I always think this: where are they going to be able to sleep? How can they like relax and rest? Like, because they're constantly like something's constantly after them, and there's no safe place to go. And that freaks me out because I think like, how do you like there's always this person coming after them, and they have no time to even like rest or anything. They're just constantly running, and and I just think like how do you do that? But a lot of times they have someone who will be the lookout, while they're sleeping. You take the first 4 hours, I'll take the next, and like nobody gets 8 hours sleep in a movie. But anyway, it's like they always have that lookout. So it's always that other person. Kara's really good. She's the person I sleep with, and so she hears everything. I hear nothing at night. She hears everything. In fact, the other night I realized that she was not in bed. And I was like, what happened? And she goes, I couldn't remember if I closed the door to the van, so I just went outside and closed it. And it was like 3 a.m. So like, but she's the one that like kind of is alert. And instead of like nudging me and saying, hey, maybe you did ask me to close the door in the van, I'm not really sure. But she's always hearing that. So there's that safety there of knowing whenever she's out of town, which is not often, but every once in a while she's out of town, it's unsettling to not have someone there. Because it's like well, what will I do if someone breaks in the house? Who's gonna protect me? I won't hear it. I won't hear it. Yeah. So anyway, we stayed at a really sketchy hotel on the way to California this Christmas, like really sketchy, and I had this thought in my head of. You ever do this when you're in a hotel? Or it was a motel, but they have the 2 beds, and then there's the door. And often, good parents would say, "I'm going to sleep in the one by the door, because that way the axe murderer will kill me first." And I kind of am from the school of thought of like, well, no. No. I thought that, but then I did sleep in the front. But the whole time I thought, well, if I'm gone, who's going to protect you? So good luck getting in the car and driving away. So I really think that's flawed thought. But anyway, let's move on. So this is about survival. This is about safety. This is about trust. Honestly, just the survival of having someone with you who can overpower you when you're if one can overpower you who is alone, 2 can resist him. It's that safety that you have with others. It's that strength that is gained with 2 people. So you need to find someone who can make you stronger in any kind of thing. Have you guys ever heard the term codependent relationships? Does anybody know what a codependent relationship? It's when you need to make someone weaker in order for you to feel stronger. And so a codependent, it happens a lot of times when there's addiction, is you need that person, if you have a relationship, you need that person to stay in their addiction because then that makes you the caretaker. If it gets really extreme, it turns into like Munchausen by proxy, where you're needing to make someone ill so that you feel like you're helping, or you feel you're getting your fulfillment from helping that person. We need to find people that help us become stronger, not people who are trying to keep us in a box, who are making us weaker. I used to work in the school district with with attendance, and in that, I also worked with a lot of families who were in poverty, and that whole generational poverty thing. That is a real manifestation of stuff going on, because you will find kids who are doing who could really excel in school, and the parents who can't handle that kind of success for their children. That just they won't allow it to happen, and it's so sad to watch. And it's you get angry with the parents until you realize the same thing happened to them from their parents, as they were kept down to a certain level and couldn't rise above that. So we need to find people that will strengthen us. One of the things about strengthening relationships is when people speak truth to us. And I've had a lot of people who don't know me very well try to speak truth, and that stinks. It really does. I don't know if you guys have had that. I think it happens a lot more when you're out front, because people who are total strangers decide that they can tell you how badly you do at something, or where you need to improve. And it's not very fun. However, it's not any more fun to have someone who's really, really close to you critique you either. And, because we don't want that. We often don't want to hear truth. We don't want to hear the truth when it comes to us. And we need to be able to hear truth from people who care about us. But let me give you some advice if you are a person who likes to give truth. Because, these people, well, I just tell it like I see it, I'm just going to give that out, and they can take with it what they want, and leave what they want. You probably don't have very many people who like to be around you at that point, because the point of speaking truth, the whole goal of speaking truth into someone's life, is that they hear truth. It's not the goal that you just say what you want to say. Does that make sense? So you need to figure out, if you're one of those people who has a lot of truth in you that you just want to get out to others, you need to figure out, how will this person hear this from me? How are they going to actually hear this truth and absorb it from me? Not, I'm just going to say it, and too bad if you get offended. Well, you don't really care about that person then. Because if you cared about that person, you would want that truth to sink in, and you'd want them for that to actually affect their lives. If you're the other way, if you don't care, you're just on a soapbox. And I'm just going to say it, you're just a jerk. If you're the kind of person who just likes to give truth out and you don't care how it affects people, you're just a jerk. Pin drop. So, we want people to hear truth. That is our whole, people don't like to hear truth. I'm telling you right now, it's a hard job. It's a hard job to give people truth. If you have a friend that you need to say, like, I've got something, it's kind of hard for me to say, but this is something I see that really you need to fix. You need to really figure out, how am I going to give this in a loving way? How am I going to give this in love? Because truth without love doesn't work. How am I going to give this to you in love? And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a little hard. It doesn't mean that the person doesn't, it doesn't hurt to hear it. But if it's given in love, there's a whole different outcome there. So the last, a cord of 3 strands is not quickly torn apart. So all of a sudden we shift from, we keep talking about 1 and 2 and 1 and 2, alone and together, and then all of a sudden we talk about 3. And of course this is an easy analogy. This is when God is intertwined in that relationship. When he's the center of your relationship, you can't have an honest relationship when God is in the mix. It's impossible to have a dishonest relationship when God is in the mix. Strike that. It's impossible to have a dishonest relationship when he's intertwined. It's impossible to have a shallow or a surface relationship when you've got God in the mix, connecting. How do you combat loneliness? How do you get connected? You serve with each other. You find a way to serve with each other. You find a way to go have coffee with somebody. Try to get out of the I come to church every Sunday so everyone knows me, and really get to know people, really find out, find out how people are doing, find out how you can help with different things, find out how you can help motivate them to help them with their goals, help figure out how is it that I can serve with you, because that's honestly the best way, I think, to kind of combat that selfishness or the self-centeredness, is to begin to just serve others, serve with others, and lift each other up.
Thank you again for joining us this week at Grace Church. If you'd like to hear the sermon in its entirety, please go to www.gchurch.us, and we'll see you next week.